Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into the life of one of history's most fascinating and respected figures, a man whose name still echoes through the ages, Saladin. He was a warrior, a sultan, a statesman, and for many a symbol of chivalry and justice. So who was the man who united the Muslim world and faced off against the Crusader kingdoms? Let's find out. Our story begins not in a grand palace, but in Tikrit, in modern-day Iraq, in the year 1137. Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, as he was formerly known, was of Kurdish descent. His family was not royalty. They were part of the military elite serving the powerful Zengid dynasty. His father, Najm al-Din Ayyub, and his uncle Shirkuh were skilled soldiers and administrators. In his youth, Saladin was said to be more interested in religious studies than in military training. He was a quiet, studious young man, and few would have predicted he would one day command vast armies. But destiny had other plans. His uncle Shirkuh was a brilliant general, and Saladin began his career serving under his command. The political landscape at the time was incredibly complex. The Middle East was a fractured mosaic of competing caliphates, emirates, and the European Crusader states established along the coast. The main prize was Egypt, the wealthy and strategic heart of the Fatimid Caliphate, which was weak and crumbling from within. In 1164, Saladin joined his uncle Shirkuh on a military expedition to Egypt. This was his trial by fire. Over the next few years, they would fight a series of brilliant campaigns against both the Fatimid forces and the Crusader king of Jerusalem, Amalric. Saladin learned firsthand about strategy, logistics, and the brutal realities of war. He witnessed his uncle's tactical genius and political maneuvering, absorbing every lesson. When Shirkuh conquered Egypt and became its vizier in 1169, he died just 2 months later. In a surprising move, the young and relatively inexperienced Saladin was chosen to succeed him. Many thought he would be a weak puppet. They were wrong. Saladin moved quickly to consolidate his power. He was a Sunni Muslim ruling a predominantly Shia country. A delicate situation, but through a combination of shrewd appointments, military reforms, and by projecting an image of justice and piety, he won the support of the people and the army. In 1171, he formally abolished the Fatimid Caliphate and brought Egypt back under the authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, at least in name. In reality, Saladin was now the independent master of Egypt, the wealthiest state in the region. But Egypt was just the beginning. Saladin's ultimate vision, inspired by his former master Nur al-Din, was the unification of Muslim lands to drive the Crusaders out of the Holy Land. After Nur al-Din's death in 1174, Saladin declared himself his rightful successor. Over the next decade, he embarked on a relentless campaign of diplomacy and conquest. He marched into Syria, taking Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul, sometimes through battle, often through clever negotiations. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was building a unified empire, the Ayyubid Sultanate, stretching from Egypt to Syria. This unification was the essential first step before he could confront the full might of the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem. By the 1180s, the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. The kingdom of Jerusalem, however, was weakened by internal division. After the death of their capable but leprous king, Baldwin IV, the kingdom fell into the hands of a reckless faction led by Guy de Lusignan and the volatile Raynald de Châtillon. Raynald repeatedly broke truces by attacking Muslim caravans and even threatening the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. For Saladin, this was an unforgivable provocation. It was the final justification he needed for an all-out war. In the summer of 1187, Saladin's unified army met the combined forces of the Crusader states at the Horns of Hattin, a pair of hills near the Sea of Galilee. Saladin's strategy was masterful. He lured the Crusader army, which was heavily armored and suffering from a lack of water, into a barren, sun-scorched plain. He set fires to fill the air with smoke and cut them off from the lake, their only source of water. Thirsty, exhausted, and demoralized, the Crusader army was completely surrounded. The Battle of Hattin was a catastrophic defeat for the Crusaders. The bulk of their army was destroyed or captured. King Guy de Lusignan was taken prisoner. The notorious Raynald de Châtillon was also captured, and Saladin, fulfilling a vow, executed him with his own hand for his repeated betrayals and crimes. With the Crusader field army eliminated, the path to Jerusalem was open. One by one, the Crusader cities and castles fell to Saladin's forces. Finally, in September 1187, he stood before the walls of the holy city itself, Jerusalem. The city had been in Christian hands for 88 years, since the brutal conquest of the First Crusade. The remaining defenders feared a similar massacre. But Saladin was not a man driven by blind vengeance. After a short siege, the city's defender, Balian of Ibelin, negotiated a surrender. Saladin agreed to spare the inhabitants. Instead of a slaughter, he allowed the citizens to ransom themselves for a small fee. He even allowed many of the poor who could not afford the ransom to leave freely. His brother and commanders followed his example, paying the ransom for thousands themselves. This act of mercy and clemency stood in stark contrast to the massacre of 1099 and earned Saladin immense respect, not only in the Muslim world, but even among his European enemies. He cleansed the holy sites, restoring the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but allowed Christian pilgrims to continue visiting their own sacred places. The fall of Jerusalem sent shockwaves through Europe, triggering the Third Crusade, led by the most powerful kings of Christendom, Frederick Barbarossa of Germany, Philip Augustus of France, and the legendary Richard the Lionheart of England. The ensuing conflict was an epic clash of titans, a battle of wills between two of history's greatest military leaders, Saladin and Richard. For 2 years they fought up and down the coast. Richard won several key battles, most notably at Arsuf, and recaptured the port city of Acre, but he could never take Jerusalem. Saladin's strategy was to wear Richard's army down, harassing his supply lines and avoiding a decisive pitched battle in the open field, where Richard's heavy cavalry had the advantage. The war became a grueling stalemate. Despite being fierce enemies on the battlefield, a remarkable relationship of mutual respect developed between Saladin and Richard. Chroniclers on both sides tell stories of their chivalry. When Richard fell ill with a fever, Saladin sent him fresh fruit and snow from the mountains to cool him down. When Richard's horse was killed in battle, Saladin sent him 2 fresh mounts so a king would not have to fight on foot. They were adversaries, but they recognized in each other a worthy opponent, a fellow warrior bound by a code of honor. Ultimately, both sides were exhausted. In 1192, they signed the Treaty of Jaffa. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but the Crusaders would hold a strip of coastline, and Christian pilgrims would be guaranteed safe passage to visit the holy city. It was a pragmatic compromise that ended the war. Richard the Lionheart sailed for home, and the Third Crusade was over. Saladin returned to his capital, Damascus, not as a conqueror celebrating victory, but as a ruler focused on rebuilding. He had spent his entire personal fortune on the war and on acts of charity. Less than a year later, in March 1193, Saladin fell ill with a fever and died at the age of just 56. When his treasury was opened, there was barely enough money to pay for his funeral. He had given everything away to his people. Saladin's legacy is immense. In the Muslim world, he is revered as a hero who united his people, restored Jerusalem, and embodied the ideals of a just and pious ruler. But his reputation transcends cultural and religious boundaries. In the West, thanks to the accounts of Crusaders and the romantic poems that followed, he became the very symbol of the noble and chivalrous adversary. He was a man who could be both a fierce warrior and a merciful victor, a brilliant strategist and a man of deep faith. Even today, in a world often marked by division, the story of Saladin reminds us of the power of unity, the importance of justice, and the surprising respect that can be found even between the greatest of rivals. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the life of Saladin, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Let me know in the comments who you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, stay curious.